And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network. Well, at coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. Our original site, coalitionradio.us, is still up with literally 6 years of political interviews, activists, on a variety of causes, everything from, well, pressing to tonight's activities, legalization of drugs, immigration justice, virtually every civil liberty imaginable. We start with the Fourth. We don't believe that the Constitution ends at the First or the Second Amendment. There is a whole wide world of constitutional amendments that we revere. Most recently, most importantly, most exclusively, the Fourth Amendment. We've got a very special show tonight. We're going to be introducing to the Coalition audience a relatively new coalition, if you will. It's called Yes We Cannabis RI. Of course, they can be found at yeswecannabisri.com. We'll be sharing the link with you a lot over the coming months. It's a community coalition of a variety of organizations who, and I'm going to let them define themselves, but from my perspective, are jumping in aggressively to move, if you will, public sentiment, to engage in community education, and to apply, I'm hoping, the needed pressure to our lawmakers to finally, end the failed, racist, misogynist, brutal war on drugs, and support the legalization of all drugs, starting with cannabis. Number two, to make sure that those folks incarcerated for, and I can't ever use the V less crime word. It's utter nonsense to me, because ultimately right now we are putting into cages individuals who are merely engaging in the use of a natural product, a plant as it were. Yes, we're still incarcerating people. So I welcome to them to the war on drugs. Most of these folks are seasoned, polished activists, if you will, who engage the system not just at election time, not just when a particularly brutal outrage pops up from, as we refer to it, Halitosis Hall, Smith Hill. No, these are folks who live activism. It's part of their DNA. It's what they do. It's a function, literally, of their everyday life. So I'm going to get right to it. We've got several people to introduce. Some of folks who you may be familiar with their activities in public life. Some organizations that may be brand new to you. First of all, someone who I've had the pleasure of meeting several times at a variety of events. We all kind of run into each other at a lot of the same programs. It's interesting. Regardless of our personal politics, folks who are activists in this community share the love amongst any one of a number of causes. It could be a cold parking lot at the ACI on a Sunday afternoon. It could be literally a nightclub celebrating, but also observing and challenging the status quo when it comes to sex workers. It can be those halls that we all remember and that we kind of miss based on the Zoomification of Rhode Island politics, the long halls of Smith Hill. We've run into each other too many times, waiting in line for the next round of, if you will, testimony to begin. Jennifer Rourke is with us tonight. She is the co-founder and co-chair of the Rhode Island Political Cooperative. She was a candidate for State Senate District 69. She's an activist and a leader who calls Warwick, Rhode Island home. A mother to 4 children, she's been fighting to give a voice to the most marginalized communities for many years. Growing up in low-income housing and to teenage parents, she was taught to always fight for those that are often ignored. I'm meeting for the first time tonight Miko Lincoln. He's a lifelong resident of Rhode Island, a member of FIU, formerly incarcerated union, and part of the Yes We Cannabis RI coalition. He's been directly impacted by the war on drugs. He spent a considerable part of his life incarcerated. Learning life lessons through the unfortunate process of recidivism, he has embarked upon a life dedicated to change. He currently works as a certified peer recovery specialist and re-entry case manager, assisting individuals navigating the horrific challenges of a return to community life. Exacerbated, of course, as you can only begin to imagine, by the dread COVID-19 crisis. Helping individuals rise up from marginalized, challenged circumstances who may have spent too many years having been a part of the pipeline to prison and then having been incarcerated themselves is a part of how he's redefined his life. And of course, Maggie Kane is a member of the Yes We Can Cannabis Coalition and also a member of the Rhode Island Political Co-op. She ran for State Senate District 37, Block Island in South Kingstown, and her focus is advocating for legalization centered on social equity and criminal justice. Thank you, all of you, for spending time with us tonight. If you're an activist, this is the most wonderful time of the year, right? Because of, and particularly now, it used to be we knew that testimony began at 4 o'clock. Now we're finding out that testimony, like everything else now, is seemingly gone 7 by 24. So I'd like all of you to take sort of an opportunity, because this is the first time you're on as a group and as individuals, and I want to, in a sense, create an environment almost, I say this with love, of an infomercial, because I want folks to walk away not only with an understanding of the issues, but the perspective that each of these folks represents and the organizations that they are speaking on behalf of tonight. So, Jen, why don't you give us a shout out? Talk to us about the Rhode Island Political Cooperative and the impact it's had on electoral politics in Rhode Island in just a short time that it's been evolved.
So the Rhode Island Political Cooperative was founded by myself, Senator Janine Falcon, by Matt Brown, and by Melanie DuPont. And what we are is just a group of everyday people who are tired of the BS that happens up at the Capitol. So we have everyone from a nurse who has been on the front lines battling COVID since the start. We have a single mom who's a waitress. We have everything, anyone and everyone you can think of that is just a regular everyday person. Those are the candidates that we want. We want people who understand what happens to the regular person on an everyday basis. So why not have regular people run for those seats? And we started 2018, and we made our official announcement in 2019 with a slate of 15 candidates. And in the end, we ended up with 25 total candidates, and 10 of them did win their elections. So they are working on the city council level. Some of them are state reps and some of them are state senators. So we are just trying to make change for the everyday person.
One of the aspects of civic life up on and like we always refer to it, Halitosis Hall, and all credit to Philippe and Jorge of Motif for that, and that'll live with me forever. That and a few other analogies we talked about offline about some of our more respected the salons in the great state of Rhode Island. But there were attempts early on by establishment politicians to, in a sense, weaponize the members of the co-ops. I'll call them life-earned experiences. In fact, attempting to diminish your participation because of your regular everyday lives, where you work, where you go to school, your families. How did that feel? And yet, despite that, how much success have you had, both not only getting elected, but in terms of legislating, because of that life-lived experiences?
I will say it was very, I don't want to say hurtful, but I felt very disrespected. Obviously, I'm a Black woman, and my name was always left out of every conversation, which is nothing new. You get used to it. You know, we do the work, we don't get the credit, and it's fine because the work is getting done. But I will say, by pushing a slate of like-minded candidates that are fighting for the same thing, that believe in the same thing, that are your neighbors, that don't live in $1 million houses, we actually managed to move the needle a little bit at the State House. We were all fighting for a $15 minimum wage and Medicare for all, and just a Green New Deal, things that will make the lives of everyday people better. And oddly enough, we had a hearing on Medicare for all to start a committee or a study on it. They are pushing now for a $15 minimum wage. It's going to take longer than we want, but they are slowly coming to the side of the people of Rhode Island and further away from the corporation. So I think by doing what we did, by running a slate of candidates, we helped to push the needle a little bit, and it's just going to get pushed even further in the next cycle.
Miko Lincoln, thanks for joining us tonight. It's great to meet you virtually, as it were. Talked about us about the FIU, the formerly incarcerated union, and its goals, its mission, its membership. Kind of give us a snapshot of what you folks are involved in.
Certainly. Well, first I want to thank Pat for having me here, and I want your viewers and audience to know that the formerly incarcerated union is a union of members that were formerly incarcerated, directly impacted people who is just looking for a voice at the State House, a voice in society. For the longest time, we're human beings. We're not monsters. People who have spent time in adult correctional institution. That we're not monsters. We're human beings who have value, who have a voice, and who have a desire to participate in the democratic process. And for the longest times, we've been marginalized, and our voices haven't been heard simply because of something we have done. Whether it been a crime or whatever. And the majority of us was directly impacted by the war on drugs. I'm 49 years old. I grew up in South Providence, Rhode Island. When I was younger, I had suffered from substance use disorder. And substance use disorder does not have really anything to do with the substances. It's more my inability to cope with emotions and be able to live our life on life's terms. And that's basically coming from a perspective of not having value for myself. So us at formerly incarcerated union, we're just, we're looking to uplift our voices and, at the State House and advocate for ourselves and advocate for, our we want to progress in this society. Like I said, recidivism is part of my story, but the larger idea that FIU is that people who are directly impacted, we tend to be shunned to the side. So we're just looking for our voice, and that's basically what we're doing.
Excellent. The FIU, as my understanding, has been involved with the decarcerate movement, involved in the ongoing protests at the ACI. Is that correct?
Yes, indeed. Absolutely.
And from your perspective right now, we've had 4, some of which are still unexplained deaths in literally a handful of months at a relatively small, by national standards, prison complex. Any quick thoughts on that or comments on that at this moment? I mean, that's just a brutal situation. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. In an adult correctional institution, there's not a lot of transparency, trying to go in there and try to, figure out and get to the bottom of some of these cases, some of these issues, So we're dependent on, their narrative regarding these particular cases, Jose Franco was a good friend of mine. And, unfortunately, where his mother is outside, we're outside of the ACI looking for answers, and we're getting none. So, I can't speak to the specifics, like I said, because I don't have enough information. But like you said, it's a relatively small prison, and from a percentage perspective, 4 people dying within this year, it's insane. It just doesn't make sense. So, yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. Now, Maggie Kane is joining us as well tonight, and we had the opportunity to virtually meet. Like, that's how I guess we all are meeting these days. Talk to us about the coalition that you formed here, the history, its goals, objectives. Just lay it all out for us.
All right. So I'm very excited. Jennifer and I obviously have worked together for many years, but we also really started working closely a couple of years ago, advocating with Jared Moffitt from Regulate Rhode Island for the legalization of cannabis. And unfortunately, for a couple of different reasons, the bills never really went anywhere. Now, I will say, to plug the co-op, there is a reason why primaries are really good, because it shows elected officials where their voters stand. And I don't know, but there are a lot of senators that have been there for a very long time that are sponsors of the Senate bill. So we are excited that it seems like the quote unquote establishment has finally caught on to the fact that Rhode Island has been very late to the game when it comes to legalization. So personally, I was thrilled to meet Miko and Cherie Cruz, who are part of the FIU, and we all sort of came together from different groups. There's Reclaim Rhode Island is a part of the coalition as well. And then we just have individuals that care about this issue from so many different angles, whether it be from, the expungement criminal justice piece to, advocating for patients' rights, or even, like you said, it is a plant. There is this whole concept of why are we so scared of this plant? But to make, there are only so many issues that you can address in a certain amount of time. And when it does come to legalization of cannabis, it's a complicated issue for many reasons. So we as a coalition really decided that to make this a really great bill and a true bill, that we need to center it on the criminal justice piece and the social equity piece and social the community reinvestment piece of it. So we've really taken a lot of time and have been very thoughtful about what some of our shared goals are. And basically it is to make sure that they don't find other ways to criminalize, mental illness, let's say poverty, addiction, because there are some loophole, right? So we just want to, and plus we want to make sure that automatic expungement is there. That is the demand, right? And we are not going to take any excuses for that. And also just making sure that anyone who has any prior, marijuana charges, they're able to enter this new industry and participate in this, because it's $1 billion industry now. It's ridiculous that these people who really were invested in this industry before it was legal are now shut out of it. It makes zero sense. And we are here to make sure that the elected officials, hear this from the public, because we are paying attention.
I mean, central to the whole equation is the fact that communities of color, communities that have been disenfranchised and marginalized by the criminal justice system, communities that were targets every day of the criminal justice system, should in fact have equity if in fact this is going to be a state-controlled, rigorously mandated system, if you will. I personally prefer a world as a libertarian where, quite frankly, anyone who is willing to sell safe product should be allowed to do so without the state's interference. And quite frankly, my biggest fear is that in the state's zeal to get money and to tax it, that they're effectively going to render the program useless. That's another conversation. But it's fair to say that the Jump Out Boys never tackled EG. The last time I checked, stop and frisk wasn't being conducted on County Street in Barrington. And where I live in Cumberland, we seem to be remarkably free of any type of partnership between ICE, DEA, and the Rhode Island State Police. Am I overstating it or not?
Good point.
No, stating the obvious. Yeah.
You're 100% correct.
So Meg, I'll throw this out to the group in terms of very specifics. So let's do the deep dive. Let's go through line by item of your demands and the consensus that your group affords criminal justice within the now, I guess, money-rich opportunity, which of course seems to be the driving factor. By the way, do any of you believe that Mr. Ruggiero or any of the crew woke up one day and said, "You know what? Damn it! Prohibition mentalities, prohibition legislation has never worked, and we need to stop impacting people of color"? Do you think that's what happened here?
Absolutely not.
No.
Just wondering. So lay it all out for me. What are your demands specifically, and what needs to happen here?
Miko, would you like to go first?
Yeah. I just opened it up, and I just want to say, that's a really good question. And just, generally speaking, from a historical perspective, when we start thinking about laws and we start thinking about the marginalization of poor Black and brown people, we could just go back to Jim Crow. We can go back to the Black codes. And we can go back to laws that was specifically made for the public good. However, there was always had this intended effect to just, lock people, Black people and brown people out. At the time it was slaves, it was after the time of slavery, and this is what happens, sometimes at a state house, whether it's, consciously, unconsciously, wittingly, unwittingly, sometimes they put stuff in bills and they have, has this unintended purpose or intended purpose, I just don't know. But I just know the fact of the matter is that sometimes when these bills are presented, they have all of these hidden agendas, like there's some specifics in the bill right now that, continues to criminalize marijuana while they're legalizing it. I don't understand how that could take place. I don't understand you could say, okay, this is going to become legal, yet you're still criminalizing and locking people up. You know what I mean? To the point that they start differentiating the language. For one, it's marijuana, and that's when they're locking Black and brown people up. The other one's cannabis, is when they're making money off of it. And so these are some of the stuff that needs to be highlighted and brought to the state and the lawmakers' attention. You know what I mean? And I don't want to say force, but just make them aware that we're watching and that we understand, so that bait and switch mentality doesn't continue like it was doing like on it 20 years ago.
Right. Well, and my concern too is the absence in prior bills of Fourth Amendment protections that were waived in order to try and I'm not faulting the people who write the bills, because I know the people and their intentions were good, but I'm also not willing to give up what's left of our civil liberties in this state as you put it so aptly, a bait and switch, so that we're allowed to make the state a lot of money by buying weed. That's a no-go as far as I'm concerned. But Miko, just lay into us. What are some of the issues specifically that you demand? And I like the word demand, by the way. I think that's a happy word. I don't see demands as a problem. You get in this world what you demand. No one hands you things because it's the right thing to do. So let us in. Give us the background here.
Well, just automatic expungement. I mean, that's a non-starter. Reparation is part of a recognition that there's some harms in the past. But something about reparation is that has to come with compassion and understanding. To not allow, if they put expungement on this bill, but it's not automatic, it won't allow individuals to just automatically. In fact, what would be happening is I have to go back to court and have to beg a judge to, take it off my record. And it's in his discretion whether he will or whether he will not, I know when I was incarcerated, one of the most humiliating aspects of my incarceration was having to go to court, be stripped, officers, looking at my body and stuff like that, then go to court and have to beg for leniency. There would be the same traumatic experiences if I have to go back again and ask them, oh, can you please, you're making it legal now, can you please take, just expunge my record, please, just to be told no. So I think automatic expungement is really important. Plus, it's just, that's basically it.
Right. Now, and it's interesting because I have a spreadsheet in front of me. To your point, in Arizona, effective July 2nd, 2021, courts must, upon petition, expunge arrests, charges, and convictions for certain possession, consumption, transportation, and cultivation offenses. First off, if I'm thinking that if you've been recently incarcerated, your financial picture is probably not great. And I'm not trying to be sarcastic. That's just an honest reflection of what happens to folks as once you're put into the machine. When you talk about Arizona's laws, the notion that upon petition, well, I'm not aware, and I'm sure there's some community-based lawyers who do a lot of things for free, and I can think of a couple in Providence who are just outstanding human beings. But by and large, the signal that sends to me is that you're going to have to hire a lawyer. To your point, if you have to hire a lawyer and you have to spend hundreds of dollars or more, then because the lawyer's going to have to attend. The lawyer's going to have to make sure that I'm sure the paperwork isn't going to be a 3-line says I want my record expunged. Signature, $5 filing fee. That's not usually how it works either. Call me cynical. So you're absolutely right that there must be no component of this that requires a legal process, which again takes an arrest that never should have happened. There was no violence involved. There was no. I mean, if you're simply selling a product, engaging in a mutual transaction without coercion, then where is the crime? Where is it? I mean, you were just doing in a community what other people with a multi-$1,000 license can do selling booze. So you're right; it should be automatic. What is the status of Rhode Island's pending legislation? I mean, right now we've got 2 competing bills. We've got the governor's bill, and then we've got the Senate bill. If one of you could jump in, if you know, and let me into specifically how each one wants to handle that.
I will say that they both have okay aspects, and then they both have horrible aspects.
Right.
In regards to the automatic expungement, it's still at the discretion of the court, and it's only for possession, sale, and I can't think of the other one. There's only 3 offenses, and it's only up to a 1 ounce. So if someone is caught and they have 2 ounces, then they're not qualified. There's no expungement for them. So that means that the opportunity for them to own their own dispensary or to go back to school is null. It's not going to happen.
Right.
So there's things in there where it should say when it comes to the expungement, it should be automatic for possession, manufacturing, distribution, sales, regardless of the amount. So that needs to be included, which opens it up for a lot of people, which means that people who want to go back to school and that are not able to attain student loans, they're going to be able to go back to school and they can further their education. Or if they decide that they want to open up their own dispensary, it gives them an opportunity to do that. So you don't see that in either bill. Mm-hmm. It's usually just an ounce. And most people are like, oh my God, an ounce is a lot. An ounce really isn't a lot. There are some people who can smoke an ounce in a few days.
Right.
So an ounce it's not much. And so they're forgetting a whole group of people that have been affected by previous marijuana laws. So.
At any time, should arbitrary measurements have any impact whatsoever on what is fundamentally right or fundamentally wrong? I'm not sure. If you don't mind me asking, from your folks' perspective, how was this legislation arrived at? Were any of the organizations that you represent at all spoken to, worked with, listened to? Was there what type of citizen involvement has there been in the development of this legislation?
I never received a phone call. I know Maggie and I have been working on this for a few years now. I've never been contacted. I have put my views out in public, so there's recordings of it, but I've never received a call. I don't know about Maggie or Miko.
I have.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go right ahead.
I would say
I was just going to say, I know. Go right ahead.
You're all leaders in your respective communities. All right. You're all well known as being on the record for representing the viewpoints of the communities that you are part of. And those communities can be political, social, ethnic, racial, whatever. How is it that in the year 2021, we're still pulling together legislation that doesn't have any interaction? And by the way, it's just not you guys. When I talk about the decriminalization of sex work, if you speak to activists in the state,
you're good.
It's veritably impossible to get involved. And any of these pressing issues, how is it that the people who screwed it up so badly and created these untenable situations suddenly think they have the answers? I don't know.
I would say,
I was going to give credit to Rep. Williams and to Rep. Marcia Ringland-Vassell, because we did have a community meeting back in 2019, I think it was, where we had people, it was myself, Maggie, Emily Cotter, and there were a few people who were affected by previous marijuana offenses. Rep. Slater was sitting at the table for one meeting, but Rep. Williams and Rep. Ringland-Vassell were part of the conversation a few years back. So I will give them the credit that they deserve.
Jen, from your perspective, the absence of home grow in the governor's proposition, has that been a factor, a personal grow in your support of any legislation? Has that been part of the discussion?
For me, I personally support it. I think you should be able to grow a plant in your own home. I am allowed to have a garden where I can grow vegetables and fruits. Why am I not allowed to grow a plant that works? In Massachusetts, I know you're allowed to grow, I believe, 6 plants per adult. And I think the max is 12 per household or 18 per household. I can't remember exactly, but it needs to be included in the legislation. I know Maggie, that's a huge thing that Maggie is knowledgeable about.
Mm-hmm. So listen, I'm going to bring it back to what one of the first questions was about what are some of our shared goals from the coalition, because the point is that you could spend, and we have spent a quite amount of time going through this bill and, talking about home grow, THC levels, access to medication if you do have a, medicinal card. But really, as a coalition, we really want to talk about this automatic expungement, but also stop a further criminalization of cannabis, even if they do legalize it, which really they should call it, regulate and tax. They're not legalizing it. So they really should remove cannabis from the Rhode Island controlled substance list. Hopefully the federal government at some point will, come to their senses and take cannabis off the Scheduled 1 drug list, next to heroin. But until then, we do really need to make sure that that is taken off the list. So that way, when one of these bills passes, they don't find ways to, continue to harass cannabis users for whatever reason they decide is not within their circle of acceptance, right? Another piece, so those are two pieces that we are talking about: automatic expungement and getting the cannabis off the controlled substance list. Another piece of that is to make sure that anyone who does have a prior marijuana charge, again, is able to participate in the industry, whether it be as an employee, as a lab worker, as an owner of a retail shop. There's no way that we can go forward without the people who have paid the highest price for this ridiculous, criminalization of this plant. They need to be able to partake in this billion-dollar industry. And lastly, another piece that we are really trying to persuade the Senate, who has really moved forward on their viewpoints of this, so we do appreciate that, is to make sure that a good amount of the tax revenue is put into a locked account to make sure that that money is used exclusively for community reinvestment, whether it be grants, loans that they don't have to pay back, further education, actually giving the money to nonprofits who work directly with the community and know how that money should be spent. That is a very important piece of that, of this legislation, because, and honestly, I think that if this is an investment for all of us, it shouldn't just be like, oh, for certain communities, we're investing in the people of Rhode Island with this revenue. So those are really the pieces. We do have quite a few more detailed issues, when it comes to the criminal justice and community reinvestment, and especially the civil liberties aspect of it. But, for the sake of time, I think that when people listen to this show and they really want to know what we're fighting for and what we're advocating for, it's those 4 points. So I just really wanted to bring that back, because you really can go on, and I love it. I mean, you could talk to me all day about this subject, right? And we have, but I do want to make sure walking away that the listeners know exactly what our coalition is really advocating at this point. And we hear Miko's newborn baby. Let's give him congratulations, because he just had a baby.
Thank you. Sorry, guys.
No,
beautiful sound. Yeah.
It's a little man.
No worries. Now, you talk about reinvesting in community organizations. I think immediately of a group like DARE. Their Behind the Walls program, I think is, given all the funding challenges it face, the notion that You can work with people who are incarcerated, make sure they're in touch with their family, advocate for legislation on their behalf, fight for systemic changes in the system. That brings to one. What are some of the other things that you'd like to see done specifically with this? With which what is projected to be probably millions of dollars.
I think a big thing for me is to give an opportunity to those who have been previously affected to open up their own dispensaries or to use the funding to reinvest into themselves. So like I said earlier, there are some people who have felonies on their record who are not able to apply for student loans and, want to further their education. To give them, for me, I would call it a forgivable loan, or to help them with the initial funding that they need to open up their own dispensary. And I know at the state, the first thing they're going to say is, oh my God, we don't have any money. We don't have any money. We're not asking for money up front. We're asking to have that money set aside specifically in restricted accounts so that in a year's time, when people are able to go and to apply for it, the money is there. Right. My mother, when she bought her home, the hospital that she worked for, they gave her a forgivable loan because she'd met certain criteria. She lived within a certain vicinity of the hospital. She agreed to work for the hospital for, I think it was 4 years after she received the loan. And she bought a house. Like that was it. And there's things that we can do to help fix the problems that were created previously by these laws that are so unjust and unfair. We can do this by having the revenue go into proper accounts. We're not going to do the 911 fund all over again where everything goes into this account, into the general fund, and just disappears. We need to make sure that we do this the right way.
Which version of the legislation are you more comfortable with, and which version do you think you've got more of an opportunity to massage, if you will, to recast, to perhaps redirect on a base political level, that is?
Me personally,
I'm not a
am
fan.
very happy with Rep. Williams. Sorry, go ahead, Maggie.
No. I agree with you. I mean, I'm not jumping over the moon for either bill, but my guess would be is that the Senate bill is the more likely one to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think they're gonna Rep. Williams' bill. She's more willing to fight for the equity portion of it.
Right.
So I am happier with that portion, but I really feel like they're going to railroad this Senate bill that we don't agree with, that needs to be changed, that needs to have better wording. Like it seems like people who have been affected by, for people who were formerly incarcerated, even though the language is there, that they should have the opportunity. If you continue to read through the bill, the words kind of contradict themselves. So those people who have been affected are not able to open up their own dispensary. They're not able to work in a lab. They're not able to do certain things, which is unfair. So, but if they listen to us and they really want to do the right thing for the state of Rhode Island, mainly for the people of Rhode Island, they will listen to what we're asking for.
In terms of sponsorships of the Senate bill, and I would agree with you. The governor's bill seemed to have come out, like so many things from the governor's office, just sort of out of left field, with more of a reactionary piece of legislation than anything that involved any sort of crafting. One of the biggest roadblocks to the type of legislation that you envision as being the ideal has been if you will, the organization that represents police chiefs in the state. I mean, they are the prime, and this is my opinion, not the opinion of my guests. I'm careful to say that, but they are the prime provocateurs of reefer madness in the state of Rhode Island. Have you had any conversations with them? For whatever reason, they seem to have an inordinate amount of clout, despite the fact that one could argue that their respective police departments have been the source of some of the biggest generators of racial tension in the state. Any contact with them at all?
I personally can say I have not spoken to. The only police officer I speak to is my husband. He's a former police officer, so he does share his opinion about what it was like to be a police officer. Mm-hmm. But in the state of Rhode Island, I have not spoken to any officers personally. I don't know about Nico or Maggie.
I have not. I mean, I would suspect that, we would hope to start opening those conversations and, exchanging ideas and, just to let them know, I just bring it to your attention, our perspective and where we're coming from. We already know their perspective, of course.
Yeah.
Is this,
It would be nice to have a conversation.
I'll throw this out to all of you. How much of this is generational? Is opposition, and I'll be a little blunt here, is opposition to what I'll call common sense legislation, like the portion of the bills that in other states have been successful in expungement, for example. I mean, is opposition to that literally dying off?
I won't
To some degree,
necessarily
but
say
you
it's
also
generational. Oh, sorry, Maggie, go for it.
No. I mean, I would just say that I think a lot of it has to do with, we could say, why isn't there criminal justice centered in this bill? Well, a lot of it is if you don't experience this and you live in a life where you do not like you really don't have a source of what really goes on, you don't realize how big of a problem this is to some degree. So people who say, oh yeah, legalization, great, like that's a win. They need to understand really how there does need to be some certain things about legalization that are, again, based on the criminal justice, social equity, but also there are pieces of it. If you look at our medical marijuana program, they really almost suffocated that program, and the patients were the ones to suffer. So I would say that for this to be a strong industry and for the state, unfortunately, Pat, you're not going to agree with this, but if the state really does want to make sure that they have a steady stream of revenue, then they need a healthy, competitive market, either with different enough retail in the state, but also competitive with Massachusetts. Right. So I think there is a point where you do have to sort of point them in these and I could say that somebody wouldn't really understand that who could be, let's say, my age, or because I am so young. So you just have to sort of make sure that everyone is educated on this fully.
How do you do that? I'm sorry, go ahead, buddy.
I was going to say, I think at the same time, they need to listen to the people who have been affected. There aren't enough conversations happening to those who have been affected by legislation or by previous cannabis offenses. Instead of just thinking, oh, well, this works. How about you actually speak to the people who have been affected by it? Like, people like Miko will tell you, like, this is what happened to me. This is how we can fix it. This is how we can change it. This is how it needs to be done. And instead of having their conversations with the community, it's these internal conversations where they see things through these rose-colored glasses and they don't understand the truth behind it.
Right. It's how do we do that then? I mean, it's again, there are these competing alternate realities. Yours is the real reality. I mean, this is, if you've lived in the city, you understand how things work. If you've spent your life with this sort of rose-colored glass version of your young days in the city, and then you were ported out to the burbs, odds are you're probably not having to deal with any of these issues. And so it becomes just sort of, if you're old enough to remember Charlie Brown, when the parents talk, it's that wah, 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 wah. I by the way, it's funny because I was looking for something and I stumbled upon my testimony at one of the legalization hearings back in the day. And I remember so clearly the day that Gina Raimondo decided that it was a great idea to tax medical cannabis, which to my mind is still one of the most horrific things I've ever seen, because I think we've all known people who've been very, very ill and for whom cannabis was just a gateway, maybe not to healing, but a gateway to some quality of life. These are people who operate in their own private Idaho, as the song once said, who are just seem to dance through life untouched by the trials and tribulations that I think everyone, including myself on this call, has had to suffer. How do we do that? How do we break through that glass ceiling?
I will say that we need to elect people who actually listen. I don't know about everyone else, but I'm not afraid to go into Providence and have a conversation with someone. And I think there are so many officials who believe going into the community is the wrong thing to do. when it really needs to happen. You need to go to the people who are most affected on a daily basis and ask them, how can I help you? And what's the point of running to represent a city or a town and you're not going to do the work that the people actually need? So the conversations need to be had. They need to go have the conversations at ACI. They need to sit down with Miko and Cherie and have these conversations. They need to go to DARE and have conversations. And that's not happening. There are no longer the options to have a town hall where people can come and express their concerns. And the people that have the chance to do that, they're not doing it. You need to not be afraid. You need to talk to people. Just because someone has a record doesn't mean that they are a bad person. There are some that are, but there are people who are, I don't say that they're criminals. They have committed crimes of opportunity. You know, people don't understand when you live in a neighborhood, when you're struggling to put food on the table, sometimes you have to go out there and sell weed. Sometimes you have to go out there and sell cocaine. Like, people don't understand that, and they don't take the opportunity to understand it. They're too judgmental. You know, take your judgment aside, take your pride aside, and go have conversations with people that you normally would not have a conversation with.
If you were to, and I'll ask all of you this because you all have interactions with our elected officials. If you were to go to most state representatives or senators and ask them what their interpretation of the pipeline to prison meant, what type of response do you think you get?
Good question. For me, I think it would be, you know, inner city youths that, you know, they're bored and this is where they need to go. They're just these people that just need to go to jail, when in fact, they're not. There are people that don't have the resources that people in the suburbs have. There are people that have, I call them crime of opportunities, where everything that they have, it's like, I need to feed my family. I need to get to school. I am not truant. You know, parents are being arrested because their kids aren't going to school, but the teachers aren't realizing that this kid has a sick parent, so they're home trying to take care of their parent, or this teenager is working overnight to try and help and pay bills. Like, there's that, to me, the prison, from the high school to prison, it's just because there's a missed opportunity in the middle that they're not trying to help out, that we are lacking, and that people aren't hearing us say, or hearing us when we say we need after school programs, we need opportunities for better jobs, we need a livable wage, we need healthcare, we need to stop making these laws that affect Black and brown people at a disproportionate rate. Like, we need to stop, and you can't see that when you're in your safety bubble. Sorry.
No, that's
true.
Maggie, and what do you think? What if you were to go to? We all know there's certain legislators who, by background and or by overall intelligence, who are able to overcome, if you will, their own personal, I'll just say, born into prejudices, and are able to work beyond that. But the problem is there is this implacable block of legislators who still think it's 1954 and the streets of Pawtucket are fine, and you go out to them, to any one of a number of the businesses there, even though they don't live in Pawtucket anymore. They don't live in the south side of Providence. They don't live in the West End. They don't live in any of these places. They don't live in Arctic. They've all left them. But they've got this, again, if there's a description for tonight, it would be rose-colored interpretation of how they think things were. Not how things are, not how things really were, but how they think things are. And any failure to attain that level is clearly a failure on behalf of the individual and their own personal failures. When in fact, we all know situations where a traffic ticket, a parking ticket, can lead to literally life-altering circumstances if you're poor. I will always argue that Rhode Island is one of the most expensive places in America to be poor in, for all of the reasons that folks find themselves going down this slippery slope because of one mistake or one bit of bad luck, a car that breaks down that they can't get inspected, hundreds of circumstances. And first and foremost of these are young people getting caught with weed. And that, how do you explain to these people that should not have life-altering circumstances?
I would just say that I would just try to sort of turn the tables on them and just try to understand maybe how, even that, if you want to talk about the health of Rhode Island in general, how it affects all of us. I mean, it not only destroys this kid's life for the dumbest reason ever, but it also is, it also just doesn't work. But honestly, like I'm even struggling to answer that question. I would turn it and I would say that it's the responsibility of the people who live in their district to make sure that their elected official knows what they expect of them. And if it means spelling out, let's say, these 4 points that we've been talking about, that's on. I do think that there is something to be said about the fact that the more people who are involved, the better these people listen, because it's not like they haven't been told it before, right? They just don't want to listen to it. And I'm not, that's a generalization. I do not even want to say, I don't even know that, but we do know the way to get them to listen is to challenge their power. So we need all people who are listening to this, if you are interested in having a just, healthy, criminal justice, social equity based legalization, which is good for you, it's good for me, it's good for everybody, then go to Yes We Cannabis RI's website and sign up, because then we can teach this very long lesson that actually started in the late 1600s when this country was first colonized. That's why I don't want to have this conversation with them, because you pull on a thread and this whole sweater comes undone, right? Like it's not a simple conversation to have. Right. And you can't have someone act defensively because they're not going to listen. So I'm going to be quiet because I really do want to hear about because Miko, see, that's the thing. I don't have a lot of patience. I can't talk to people very well, but Miko's really good and he explains himself. So I want to hear
it. As you was asking that question, Pat, I was just considering, what is currently happening in our country today. You look at George Floyd, you look at all of these different social justice calls, and you see all of this crazy stuff that's going on at the United States Capitol and, the Proud Boys and all this and all that. And you have to stop, whether you live in a bubble or not, and see this for what it is. The fact of the matter is, this country has been grappling with a real serious problem, a real serious disease, and that's racism. And it's continue to rear its ugly head in every facet of our society, and that is why we can't get no progress. So as individuals, if we don't, as an individual, my responsibility is for me to understand this stuff. My responsibility is for me to start, to educate myself, and of course I have a responsibility to educate others as well. But for the people, your viewers, and those who are, within the sound of my voice can hear this, their responsibility is to really care. You know what I mean? I'm a human being just like them. I might have different color skin, but I still bleed red. You know what I mean? And I still have emotions. I just have a 10-year-old newborn son that I want to see prosper. I want to see my son become a productive member of society with honor, integrity, standing on principles that, that move human beings forward. And I can't do that if at every turn, I'm being harassed in some way, shape, or form, So there's some state representatives, senators, who know what it means, what I mean, to go from, from school to the training school to the ACI. You know what I mean? They know that pipeline, travel, that walk of life. They know it, like the back of our hand. And then there's others who don't know. You ask Representative Williams about that. She knows firsthand. Scott Slater, he knows about it. You know what I mean? He comes, he goes to their meetings, behind the wall meetings, he sits down and he educates himself, But then there's others who are really remote, you know what I mean? They jump in their BMWs and they go back to their little bubble, and they really don't give it as much thought. You know what I mean? Their constituency might not be a majority of them, blacks or African Americans or Hispanic or whatever the case may be. There might be their whole different demographics. So, they cater to that which their constituency is, but they're representatives of the state. So they might take care of a particular district, a particular city, but they still represent the state of Rhode Island. You know what I mean? And I'm part of the state of Rhode Island. I'm a lifelong resident of Rhode Island. So I would think that they would have my best interests interests as well, and it's their responsibility to show some empathy towards us, and we can educate them. But yeah, absolutely, man. We just need to educate one another. That's it.
So what are the next steps for the coalition? You've gotten off to a wonderful start. I know you had a Zoom conference with a number of stakeholders the other night. You're reaching out to a variety of communities through organizations like ours. When do you anticipate these bills being heard, and what pressure, or what's the next step to bring pressure to bear on these individuals? I know I'm happy to come along and do whatever I can. I'm one person. We're a hardy little but small little outfit here, and I know that Steve Alquist and a number of other folks in the alt media are eager to support your efforts. So what's the next step? Where do we go from here?
Jen?
Wow. For me, the
Or I can
biggest thing
answer
is to
some.
actually, as I said, we need the people who are writing the bills to actually hear us. I would love to sit down and speak with Senator McCaffrey, myself, with Senator Miller, with everyone else in the room, so that they can hear us, the people who are involved in the community, and actually hear how their legislation is going to affect us. I think now it's just the time to get what we need and what we want as the people who are going to be affected. I think we need to get our concerns out there, and I would love to do it. I'm all for meeting for face-to-face if that's what they want to do, but they need to hear us. So we're just going to keep getting our voices out there and just trying our best to get them to understand that what they have right now is not enough. Not even close.
Maggie, what are your thoughts?
Well, we're really trying to focus on the Senate bill right now, because probably there will be a hearing in the Judiciary Committee in the next couple of weeks. And we want to make sure that the committee understands what we really want to be amended in the bill. So that's just a very clear message. We want to reach out to, voters in those areas to make sure that they communicate with their elected officials, especially the senators, what they expect, like we said. And, personally, a lot of this is working my own advocate network, because personally, I have always felt like cannabis and drug legalization and the war on drugs is such, it carries so many of the issues that we've talked about, about criminal justice and the history in this country and how those drug laws were even created in the first place. I mean, they're really arbitrary. Like, the fact is that they were made up for racist and xenophobic reasons. So, why are we even subscribing to this idea that cannabis is dangerous? I'm not going to say it because someone's going to get up, about anyway, but, it's a very harmless plant.
Right.
So I would really want the people who I've worked with in the past 4 years, who have chosen to take their organizations and have claimed that, racial justice and criminal justice and economic justice and social justice are going to be the goals of their group. Excuse me. Please understand that cannabis legalization is just not about, being able to smoke weed. There's a lot there. And I would just hope that they would join our fight and understand that they are needed. We all need to stand united about this. This is not just about, the idea of being able to smoke weed or whatever the idea is, the stigmas and all that stuff. This is really about righting the wrongs that we have been doing since, the early 1900s, when these first drug prohibitions really started. Right. So that's my hope moving forward, is that we really, that these groups and individuals listen and join us and go to, Yes We Cannabis Rhode Island's website.
Miko,
yes.
I just wanted to reach out to Miko with a question. Miko, in a very large sense, your role is one of the most challenging on an individual basis. Yet at the same time, your participation presents the most opportunity. And what I mean by that is you've been involved in the criminal justice system. Yours is now a life well lived, and you can speak. And it's it's interesting because in certain circles this would almost be a cliche, but when you talk about truth to power, yours is in fact a very powerful testimony, and it is a testimony. the reaching across the borders and the boundaries of quote unquote civil life in Rhode Island. I'm going to try and do, from my perspective, whatever I can to introduce stories of how the prison pipeline reaches out and grabs a hold of people, and yet at the same time, how despite all the most astonishing challenges imaginable, people like you learn to live to rise above them. Is that a role you're comfortable carrying? And what are your thoughts on what you would say to people being, again, testimony to this whole system?
So, yeah, I accept that responsibility, and I think I'm comfortable in that role. I think, like you said, it is, it's kind of contradictory, that my life has been one, not well lived, unfortunately, but fortunately for me, it is, because, some things I've done in the past is some things I've done, but they're not who I am, and they never was who I was. You know what I mean? Those are things I've done, not who I am. And now I understand that my past is not, it's not a liability, it's an asset. There's individuals who are, exiting the adult correction institution every day. And, I can be there for them, hold out my hand and explain to them, there's systems, there's ways, there's civic participation that you can get involved in that can really dramatically change the way you looked at life, and that's what happened with me. Individuals, took the time to really care about me. I work at the Amos House, which is located, it's a nonprofit organization located in Providence, Rhode Island. And Eileen Hayes, who happens to be CEO, really, took the time to really care about me and care about me as an individual and show me that I did have value. And that in turn aid me in understand that I do have value and I can be an asset to some organizations and to this particular coalition and to many others, that's exiting. So I would say to individuals who are being released, you can make it, you can be successful if you just believe in yourself, and as far as the prison pipeline is concerned, it starts when you're in elementary school. I went to elementary school in Providence, Rhode Island, and they didn't teach us about civics there. They didn't teach us about civic participation. The resources wasn't there, and I assume that that's the case right now because and I know this is totally for a different show, but right now I think the state took over the Providence school system, so on and so forth. But it starts there, and it just never ends. So that's what I could.
Well, I'll disagree. I'll disagree with you on one thing. I think your life is clearly well lived, and that's not to try and patronize you. It's a recognition of being able to rise above events. And if this opportunity now gives you a chance to impact the community in the way I think it can, because I think this is the beginning. This is not a battle that I believe is going to end in this legislative session. I think we're still a little bit of ways. I think that from my personal perspective, that the legislature is looking to do a little bit of a quick end run, a quick revenue grab, without real consideration of not only the events and the issues that your organization is centered on, but there are others as well. And so I think they're going to find, and I hope they find, that the communities now involved will present a roadblock to this until they reconcile outstanding issues like the criminal justice system and, like I said, protection of our Fourth Amendment and our search and seizure, our rights against search and seizure. So I first of all, congratulations on all this. We'll close out with, we always end all of our shows with what we call shameless self-promotion. So if we can go around the room and folks just, for the record, put out there how they can reach the coalition, how they can reach you, and what organizations you represent, and for folks who are moved by this in the coming weeks, how they can become involved. Maggie, why don't you go first?
Maggie, you can go first.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So, I would just say, please go to our website, YesWeCannabisRhode.com. That will have links to all of our social media and a lot of our videos that we have done. We will be doing a lot of, let's say Facebook Live events to sort of, we started with an introduction of what we're trying to advocate for, but we are going to sort of further, again, educate and explain how the situation really, needs to be fixed. And so I would just say, please go to the website, check us out. Obviously I am a member of the Rhode Island Political Co-op, and I'm very excited about this. So.
Super.
Yeah.
Ms. Rourke, how can folks reach out to you?
Not only can you reach me at the yeswecannabisri.com, but my website is jenniferrourkeri.com. I'm also on the Rhode Island Political Cooperative. You can find me on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I am everywhere. But I'm just asking if you have been affected by, I heard you, Maggie, if you have been affected by previous marijuana offenses or anything, please go to the Yes We Cannabis RI page and share your name. We would like to collect stories so that our legislators can hear how laws have affected people on a real basis.
Mr. Lincoln, how can folks get in touch with you and your organizations?
Yes, I'm a third here. Yes, we can our on cannabisri.com. You can reach us there. We have resources, information to help you get caught up and updated on the current legislation that's taking place, and we'll be able to, direct you to resources. Also, I'm part of the formerly incarcerated union, FIU. You can reach us on Facebook, and Twitter.
And I would invite everyone to follow the efforts of the Decarcerate movement. And that's how I think you can reach also a number of organizations in the province area that have been sort of brought under that umbrella. And it's a wonderful opportunity for organizations out there, I think, who would like to reach out to you folks and lend their voice and lend their support. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I hope this was.
Thank you for having us, Pat.
Yes, thank you.
Listen, it's an open door. We all share the same goals, the same missions. It's through crossing political boundaries and sometimes the artificial boundaries that are put up by the system to prevent different groups from working together. They fulminate a great deal of disinformation, and when different organizations actually sit down, the purpose of the show, the coalition, it's called the coalition, much like your coalition, is to take folks of different backgrounds, different political beliefs, find out where we have overlap, find out where we have shared beliefs. And I joked with Maggie the first night I spoke with her about this. Let's spend the next 10 or 15 years figuring out how to fix those things, and then we can get back to disagreeing, and we can get back to that. And ironically, I bet you we won't. There's a hell of a lot of work to be done, and we're in crisis mode. It needs to really happen now. We can't lose another generation of this, can we?
No, we cannot.
All right,
we cannot.
Absolutely not.
100%.
We're going to sign off then. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Radio Network at coalitionradionetwork.com. Tonight's show will be in replay throughout the week and will also be hosted on the coalitionradionetwork.com. You can find us at Facebook at facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. And as always, we like to say the mighty, mighty Twitter at @Coalition_radio. If you haven't liked or followed us, we'd ask you just to take a moment, if you could do that. The ability to overcome the noise level that is social media these days is only accomplished by those likes and shares and follows. We want to present to the community an opportunity to discuss the more challenging issues that face the body politic. We will never become one of those, what are your favorite color, or can you believe someone said this type of media outlets. That's not what we do. That's not why we're here. We thank you for your participation tonight, and we'll be back on the air tomorrow night.